our BidBuy e-procurement system. My name is Lori Lawton. I am an SPO and member of the BidBuy team, and I'm joined here by other members of the BidBuy team who are available to answer your questions. For those of you who are familiar with GoToWebinar and everyone else, what we find that works best for these sessions, especially when we have a large number of people participating, is for you to type in your questions. Feel free to type in the questions, as soon as you think of them, and we will get to those questions as we move throughout the session, as well as possibly going through a group of questions if we got quite a number at the end of the session. But do feel free to type in your questions whenever you would like to add them, and we will get to your questions. Our presenter today is Dave Luttrell. He is an acting SPO, and he's a procurement specialist related to the small business program. And that is one of the reasons that we asked him to present this today, is because he has a great deal of experience working directly with vendors and assisting vendors, and a great familiarity with the specific information that vendors need to know. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave, and Dave will go through and provide you with some general information about the seller role within BidBuy.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. We may have a little bit of a crossover from this morning's session, but I did just want to make a note. This morning we did the seller administrator role. We talked about getting registered in BidBuy and what that seller administrator role is. On Thursday, we will have each of these trainings again. They'll be flip-flopped, so the seller role will be on Thursday morning at 9 a.m., and the seller administrator role and registering BidBuy will be at 1 p.m. on Thursday. The email that you guys received should have all that information on it, but as we get to the end of the presentation, I'll show you where you can find all that information as well. So today we're going to talk about understanding why the state of Illinois implemented BidBuy. We're going to go over some general navigation as your seller role in BidBuy, talk about all the different highlights that are on the home screen. This will be a brief overview of your seller role. We will specifically answer more the deep dive questions concerning how you respond to bids in other trainings after the holidays. But today we'll just be kind of dipping our toes into your seller role and what that means to be a seller in BidBuy. So we're going to explain what that seller role does. We're going to understand and talk about the BidBuy homepage, understand the purchase order processes and the requirements involved there, as well as understand the shipping address information, where we have ship to and bill to addresses, as well as showing you where we can access more resources. So what is BidBuy? So currently the state has multiple legacy systems that use a part of the procurement process. Many different agencies use different programs for instance, approvals for, you guys are very well aware of the Illinois Procurement Bulletin, as well as the procurement file that is required by state law per the Illinois State Procurement Code. Good news is all of this is going into one system into BidBuy, which is the Illinois' new e-procurement system. So it'll be more efficient from the state side, as well as it'll be easier for you guys to do business with the state. So that was just a brief overview of that. So why? So from your perspective, it's going to simplify the bid and quote process by allowing electronic submittals. So that will reduce all our paper documentation and records, and it will centralize all the state procurement communications into one single location. It's also going to allow you to easily review all your open bids. You can submit all your bids and quotes electronically, as well as receive those awards from a central location. Also, it allows you to review all your procurement history for your business. So in the past, there's stacks of paper all over the place, and here it's just going to go right to BidBuy. You can view everything that your business has bid on, has received notices and solicitations for, and as well as all that procurement history all in one spot. So as I spoke about a little bit earlier, there's two types of the vendor roles that are in BidBuy. So we have a seller role and the seller administrator. So as a seller, you'll be able to search, view, respond to bid opportunities, as well as search and view active state contracts and view purchase orders as a seller role. The seller administrator will be able to do all those functions as well as maintain their business's information, all the user profiles, and can invite associated organizations to register in BidBuy. Now this can be changed at any time, and there can be multiple seller administrators on one single account, but there must always be at least one. So this is the seller administrator is going to manage all the business information, whereas the seller role is going to be doing all the day-to-day selling to the state. So here's a brief little look, a little sneak peek of what the seller homepage is going to look like. You can tell up here on the right-hand side where there's a seller tab and a seller administrator tab. Now, a seller administrator can be a seller, but if you are just a seller, you may not see the seller administrator tab on your homepage. And we'll get to that in just a moment when we get to the general navigation, and we'll go through all these different tabs and look at their functionality. But I just want to give you a brief view of how what that's going to look like for you. As well as a general overview of some of the new language that we'll be using in BidBuy. Some of the terms on the left hand of your screen you're going to be very familiar with. Currently, a solicitation or notice is going to be a bid in BidBuy. The IPB registered user is now going to be bidders. An addendum is now going to be an amendment. The bid, offer, or response will now all be notated as a quote. Award information in the IPB is now going to be the bid tab. Contracts will now be purchase orders or POs, so we'll see that a lot. And amendments will be change orders. So we're not expecting you to memorize this right off the bat, but once you get in the system and you start speaking that BidBuy language, it'll take no time for you to kind of flip that switch and be talking BidBuy. And speaking of particularly that general overview of your crosswalk too, I just want to make a note that these slides will be available. We'll post them out on the Pathway to Procurement site, and there will be tons of resources available for you there, and we'll get to that in just a moment. So first off, we're going to talk about the purchase order notification. So should we touch on this first, or should I go out to the general navigation?
Why don't you go out and take a look?
Okay, so we'll go out to the general navigation. I'll show you that site that we were just looking at. I'm logged in here. So in BidBuy, we're going to work through these things top to bottom, left to right. Here is that seller tab here as well, like I was showing you. Here's the seller administrator, which we spoke about earlier this morning on our seller administrator training. So the top left-hand corner, we can have the NGP Code Browse. So all of your NGP codes will be listed here. This is a search function. So if you go out, you can search for the class item, which is the broader, and then you can go through here and you can see all the more specific ones as you go through your NGP code. So, and I will make a note here as well for those vendors that are registered in the Illinois Procurement Gateway. All of this information will be pre-populated, as well as from your seller administrator. Your seller administrator will have these picked, and those will be have the appropriate NGP codes for your business. The My Account function here is just your standard account information. I chose Dave's Guitar Shop as my dummy vendor. I always wanted to have a guitar shop, so there we go.
And Dave, one of the things I just wanted to point out here, depending on the size of business that you have and the number of people who will be accessing the system, you may be a smaller business enterprise that has one seller administrator, and that seller administrator is also the seller within the system. However, you may also be a very large entity, and you may have 20 divisions, and every division has its own seller administrator, and then every seller administrator has 15 sellers. that actually are involved in the state procurement process. So it's really important to point out that on this My Account Information screen, that main email address that is entered there is a key and extremely important email address. So whatever information is contained within the system in terms of the account and the major organization email, make sure that your email stays up to date, that if you have changes to your email, that you update that and have the most current email information.
Thank you, Lori. So that's the My Account information. The customer service here is a link that will go directly to the vendor help desk that will automatically link to the email and shoots an email to the customer service desk for BidBuy. And then the about here is just the version of BuySpeed, which is the program that we're running. If we keep going over to the right, there's a very important timestamp here. So the BidBuy time here is a clock that you can always see. It runs 24/7, and this is really important because responses that are due will be time-stamped when you submit them using this exact time. So, you know, just because your watch is has a different time than here, this will be the official timestamp. As you move further over, we have the quick search, which is an advanced search. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but just so know that that's there, that you can go and look through all your bids, commodity codes, contracts, purchase orders from one quick search button there. So in the left-hand side over here, you always have your home button. So if you ever are wandering through BidBuy and find yourself lost, you can always go back to this home screen. Moving over to the POs. So the PO tab shows you the status of all the purchase orders that are sent by the state to you. If you click on there, you'd be able to see if you had received purchase orders from the state, there would be listed here. So if you click on, just a note here, the sent to vendor, the partial receipt, complete receipt, and closed are not being used by the state, but the sent to vendor is where you'll see all your POs. So moving on to your bids tab. So the bids is going to show the status of all the open and closed bids at any time. So you have your open bids here. You have the closed. So the open bids is when a bid's available for responses by you. The closed is when a bid is no longer allowing responses from the vendors. And Lori, do you want to talk about the open rolling enrollment?
Right. So for the most part, our e-procurement system is based on, open competitive solicitations, but occasionally we will have the kinds of procurements, such as an emergency procurement, for example, that may have additional bids being submitted throughout the life of the procurement. So open and rolling enrollment is a rarely used feature within the system that allows for ongoing quotes to be submitted for a particular topic. So not used very much, but just so you know, it is a feature we do use. And if you do see it, it does have to do with being able to submit without paying attention to the beginning bid date and an ending bid date.
Right. And looks like we have a question here. Let's go in here. Customer service link doesn't work on Google Chrome or Internet Explorer. Is that an issue that's being looked into? I haven't run into that issue. I know we just used it in the earlier webinar, and I checked it this morning as well. So I'm sorry. We will definitely look into that and make sure that that is up and running.
A little hint, and we will definitely. The good news is we have someone from our vendor help desk here who can also look into that. But when you do have a problem, if you run into something like that, please do send it via email to our vendor help desk and they will look into it. My guess is there's every possibility that one of two things happened. Either in your system, you have a pop-up blocker on and it's not allowing that email to pop up. So that would be a setting within your system. The other thing that sometimes happens is sometimes the pop-ups pop up, but they're hidden behind the screen you're on. So you can always minimize the screen that you're looking at, look behind it, and see if it's possibly back there. If not, troubleshoot it and look at your settings for pop-up blockers.
And speaking of the vendor help desk, as soon as we get done with this navigation and one of our other slides, we have that. We have all the contact information as the phone number and the email to the vendor help desk. Okay, so that's the bids. As we move over to the contracts, so the contract is going to allow the user to view the vendor's master blanket contracts in these sub tabs that are here. And so, you know, with this dummy vendor that I've made up, you're not seeing any of these that are in here right now, but if you had a contract, it would be listed here. So the master blanket, and like I said, here's the contract. So as we get into moving on to the quotes, you'll see where there is the informal quotes. So this is where you're going to be able to view all your informal quotes that are requested by the state. The informal quotes will be like your purchases that are below the small purchase threshold, as well as your formal quotes that are in process or submitted by you that you'll be able to work through here. So your working quotes will be the ones that you haven't submitted yet. Say you got pulled away from your desk, you'll be able to come back and look at your working quotes. The submitted ones, you can see where the ones that you have submitted, these cannot be modified at that point. Your formal quotes that are withdrawn are the quotes that you were able to withdraw, and they may be modified, as well as the unsubmitted ones where all the working quotes, regardless of your bid status, may be modified based on that bid status. So we kind of move along to our quotes there. So that's a brief little overview of all the information that you'll be looking for and what you'll be seeing. We suggest, you know, getting in there and being able to look around yourself, and you'll become a lot more familiar with the system. It looks like we have another question. This morning you got to a summary screen. Can you demo that again at the end of the presentation? Thanks. Summary screen. I'm not sure if...
That's in the registration.
In the registration. Oh, okay. We might be able to briefly do that at the end, but this is specifically for the seller role. These are being recorded, and you'll be able to access these being posted, so you'll be able to access that yourself, I believe, but that was more for a seller administrator role when you're being registered. So let's go back to so you receive a purchase order notification, you'll receive an email. So now we're going to talk about the releases off of masters. So like I said, we'll talk specifically about how to respond to some of those informal quotes, how to respond to an invitation for bid in subsequent trainings that will be after the holidays. But so today we'll talk about you'll receive a purchase order that's going to be off this master contract. This is what that email is going to look like. You'll see all the information. You'll see the purchase order number. Provides you with a link to the login where you can go straight to that and log in as well. There are a couple important things here that I want to talk about, and I just moved on too far. If you see, here's important vendor instructions here. The next slide, I'm going to enlarge that so we can talk about it a little bit more. But this is something that we've received some feedback from some of our pilot agencies that have gone live with BidBuy. And this is important, something to talk about. So the important vendor instructions regarding the purchase order requirements, State of Illinois agencies. So prior to the commencement of billable work, delivery of supplies, or rendering of any service, and this is going to be on a purchase order exceeding $20,000. So this is where above $20,000 needs to be obligated by the comptroller's office. So if it's an initial purchase order contract, all parties, including the state and vendor, must fully execute the contract in its entirety. So we need to see 3 signatures that are on there. So if you receive this initial purchase order, that is not signed, and we'll show you an example of a purchase order here in just a moment. If that is not signed, we don't want you to start to fulfill the order because that order will not be obligated by the comptroller's office. So we need to have the proper signatures that are required before that is to be fulfilled. So on a release from an existing purchase order or contract, the state vendor or the vendor must receive a purchase order signed by the state agency and attached in BidBuy. So there you'll have your 2 signatures that are by that state agency on an existing purchase order. So purchase order requirements for other purchasing entities, please see specific requirements provided by the purchasing entity. So we just want to make a note there. If it's below $20,000, you won't need to be concerned with this requirement, but above $20,000, we did want to make a special note that those signatures must be on there.
And it's 20 and below, and then above 20.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry.
And you totally blew away 20,000 total.
Yeah. So if it is specifically 20,000
and below.
And below.
Yes.
Thank you for catching that.
That's okay.
I appreciate it. So here's an example of a signed PO notification. A lot of the information is going to look the same. This is where it says this change order notification is being sent to you because this is a signed PO. So if you look down here in the bottom, this change order description, it's a release off a master that the agency has signed. So that's an example of what you'll want to see, and you'll be able to go and once you log in, you'll be able to go and see the attachment of that agency signed purchase order.
Yeah, if I can just add there, so this is the notification that you receive after the signed purchase order has been attached, and it might be a little confusing as you look at it to see this is change order number 1 and the change order date and the change order description, release off master, and agency signed purchase order. The reason it says change order, that's our internal process that we use to attach that document. It doesn't mean that you're receiving a change order necessarily. You're just receiving a notification that the state has attached the agency signed purchase order.
Great, thank you. So here's an example of a purchase order that you'll see. You'll see that you have the release, the blanket order number here. A lot of the just very specific information, the vendor number, everything that is very appropriate. You have your ship to address here, as well as your bill to address. The kind of fine print here that we just talked about is all right here. You can see that going over the signature requirements that are needed there. Is there anything to add for that PO? Okay. For the shipping address, Laura, you want to jump in on about the header level versus item level?
Sure. So Dave, if you'll pull back BidBuy, pull up BidBuy. And let's say we don't have any. Well, let's go back to the display of purchase order then. Okay, so the purchase order here, when you receive notification of an award of a contract and you receive this purchase order document, this one looks very clear. So it says that you've got a purchase order number up there in the corner, you've got the purchase order date that's printed, you have your vendor name there, you have the ship to address. In this particular case, the ship to says ship to the legal services at 100 West Randolph, and the bill to address, same place. So that's all very simple and straightforward. And that is when we add a basic ship to and bill to address that is going to apply to everything on that purchase order. But we also have circumstances where we may be sending you an order, and it's a large order. And, you know, some of the items on the order are going to one ship to address, and some of the items on the order are going to another ship to address. So what we wanted to share with you is you can receive a purchase order that simply has the items listed and has the ship to and bill to information right here at the header of your purchase order. But if we go down, you'll see here, this is an example of the shipping address which could occur specifically for an item. So if you receive a purchase order and it shows you a specific ship to and bill to address specific to a line item, that is the ship to and bill to that will be used for that particular line item. This has caused some confusion, and as we all expect when we roll out a brand new system, there are certain things that are adjusted. So this is one of the things that we're looking at to see what we can do to make this much more clear. But what we really wanted to point out in our session today is that if you have any questions when you receive a purchase order and you see a line item ship to bill to, and that's different from what you're expecting to see on that particular purchase order, that is a great time to pick up the phone and actually call the buyer related to the particular purchase order that you've received. So your buyer will be able to quickly answer that question. If you don't have information or are having any difficulty contacting the buyer, always when in doubt, you can reach out to our vendor help desk as well to get assistance. But please be aware that you may receive a purchase order with multiple ship to and bill to locations based on the individual line items. And hopefully that's something that you're accustomed to seeing.
Great, thank you. So here is the email for the vendor help desk, as well as the phone number for the vendor help desk. They're a great resource there to be able to help you work through any issues that you may have in terms of logging in, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm sure we may have some questions, but before we get to that, I did just want to go out and show you guys very quickly the Pathway to Procurement site. So what you can do, you can just Google Pathway to Procurement, Illinois, or there's two ways here. So it comes up immediately there. You can see where BidBuy is down here. And there's a lot of information that is out here on this Pathway to Procurement site. There's BidBuy there. You can see some of our vendor training, some of the events that we have that are lined up. So we were talking about earlier some of the training that is going to be involved. Here is the exact links to all our webinars. Thursday we have the webinars as well as the 9 a.m. as well as the 1 o'clock one. Stay tuned to this site as we are adding and we're providing more training and more in-depth training on how to respond to bids, quotes, and this will all be housed on this site right there. So if you go to BidBuy, there's also some great information here. Like we spoke about this morning, here are some videos on how to register. That's more of the seller administrator role. But we also have a seller manual here that you can go out and peruse through and work through any questions you may have. You might want to take a look at this first because that is going to be very helpful in helping getting many of your questions answered to begin with. So there's a lot of resources out there to go out and take a look at. With that said, looks like we have a question over here. On the POs, will the delivery calendar day list the month the products are expected?
Absolutely. So one of the things I think that's really important to think about a little bit differently with the state BidBuy system is while we have print purchase orders, our print purchase orders are really for convenience, so that you can have a print record. But this truly is an e-procurement system as opposed to being, just sort of what we're accustomed to, sending back and forth of paperwork. So while we displayed for you today a print purchase order, Within the system itself, once you are logged in, you're going to be able to click on the link to all of your awarded purchase orders. You're going to see a lot more detailed information on the screens within BidBuy itself, and then you will receive, and you're able to print that summary purchase order document. But the system itself will contain a lot of detailed information, and so in addition to the business days, I do believe the system does display the expected due date.
Okay, thank you, Lori. I know we threw out a lot of information to you, so if you have any other questions, we'll leave the line open for a little while. Looks like we have another one. On the POs on quarterly awards, will the months to be delivered listed in the item number? On the POs on quarterly awards, will the months to be delivered listed in the item number?
So this, Dave, sounds like an extremely specific question. It sounds like a fairly unique set of circumstances. One of the good things about the system is there are some additional features where an agency can add what's called a narrative item in addition to your line item. So that might be something that's contained within the system, is an explanation about a quarterly award. The other option is there are some notes that are also available within the electronic system. So I'm not exactly sure about your question about quarterly awards and the months to be delivered being listed in the item number. But I would just suggest that any very unique and specific information about a procurement can be added into the e-procurement system.
Okay, we have another question. When does this system go live? So we have several agencies that are already have gone live with it. They're pilot agencies that went live this fall. All our release off of masters are involved with BidBuy right now. And our first big batch of agencies that are going live is going to be January 1st. Like I said, it'll be another batch of phase 2, which will be going live in March. And then by July 1st, all state procurement activity will be done within BidBuy. And I did just want to make a note too. This is all the procurement activity underneath the Chief Procurement Office of General Services. So you may have other procurement offices that, for instance, Higher Ed or Capital Development Board, that they have their own bulletins. This is all going to be underneath the Chief Procurement Office of General Services. So January 1st, March 1st, and then July 1st, everyone will be in. Our next one was, when will the site launch and be used instead of IPG? So the Illinois Procurement Gateway will still be in effect. It's going to be our small business set-aside program is all housed within Illinois Procurement Gateway. The Illinois Procurement Gateway is a vendor portal that also feeds all the information into IPG. So we spoke a little bit about this morning for your seller administrators. If they go into register your business, if your business is in the Illinois Procurement Gateway, all of that information, or most of it, will be already pre-populated. So the IPG is still going to be around, and it will be in use. So we still encourage all you vendors to be in the IPG, as it is a very helpful thing for state personnel as well as the vendors. So when will you know that your company is being transitioned over to BidBuy? I would suggest that's probably an internal question for your business.
Yeah, so we're not transitioning to BidBuy, based on a company. And we really appreciate the vendor community, and especially this particular group. You've attended, you've made it to our training session, and as the state is going through its process of transitioning to a lot of new integrated systems, there's going to be that kind of rollout period or process. But this is a really good question. So right now, most agencies are doing their releases off master contracts within BidBuy. And going forward, as Dave mentioned, on January 1st, we're going to have a new group of about 18 state agencies that will be going fully live within the system. So that includes small purchases, IFBs, RFPs, emergencies, sole sources, you know, all of the procurement activity for those agencies on July 1. In March, another group of agencies will be transitioning. So the answer, that's a long answer to your short question, which was, you know, how will we know as vendors when we're going to be affected? And it will truly be a period of time where some procurements are going to continue in the IPB for a period of time, and some will be located within BidBuy. We will be doing cross-postings so that if you're very accustomed to being in the IPB and procurements are beginning to be done in BidBuy, we will have very minimal cross-posting information in the Illinois Procurement Bulletin that points you over to BidBuy. But short answer is, in the interim period of time, both the IPB and BidBuy will remain active as we move to June 30th of 2018.
And we had this question earlier too, concerning what will happen with the IPB. So I figured it would be at least important to note that the IPB will still be around for historical context and for contract history. But once the agencies have all gone live and they're all into BidBuy, the IPB, no procurement activity will be taking place on the IPB, but it still will be out there if you need to reference an older contract. Well, like I said, why don't we leave it open for a few more minutes, just in case there's any other questions. But I really want to thank you guys for being here. I know you guys are busy, and you guys will have other questions as you get further into the system. We will have plenty more of these trainings that are going to be out there. Thursday, we'll have the seller administrator role as well as the seller role again. Please go out to the procurement or the Pathway to Procurement site and take a look around. I think that there's tons of information out there for you, as well as being able to keep track of all the webinars that we'll be providing. And with that said, we'll leave it open for a little bit, but thank you and have a wonderful day.
If you want to stick with us for just a little bit longer, we're going to have a demonstration of contract search and bid search from the main page of BidBuy.
Okay, so I did want to show you, and thank you, Samantha, for reminding me. I appreciate it. This is the main page of BidBuy. If you go out there, you can also see a lot of the general information that's here, how to respond to bids, step-by-step guide, how to register, which will take you a link to that site. So even if you just go directly to the BidBuy site, you can still access all of the videos that I showed you earlier. So that's a great way to do it. Here's all the links to archived information to the IPB, the Illinois Procurement Gateway. So all that information is here on the main BidBuy page, as well as down here, we talked about this a little bit this morning in terms of registering and completing a registration that had already been started. But I did want to make a note here. This open bids that is on the main page of BidBuy, this is essentially going to act as your Illinois Procurement Bulletin at this point. That's the public-facing side that you can browse all the open bid opportunities. So just know that that is there as well as the So the contract and bid search here, you can go out and search for bids, as well as contracts and master blankets there. So that's an option that you don't have to be logged in to be able to go out and look for these as well.
And Dave, one thing, if you're looking for a specific bid, like number or something like that, we know they're very long and drawn out because they utilize the department codes and such as that. And all a vendor has to key in for their search, like on that bid number field, would be the last 4 digits, because that's truly the number they need to worry about.
Great point, great point.
And if they ever see one that has a colon after those last 4 digits and a number, so like 2444 colon 15, that's going to show you that that is a release off of a master, and that it is the 15th order off of that master. So, but it's very important when they're trying to search, don't worry about that big, long, drawn-out bid number. Go with those last 4 digits.
That is a good tip. Thanks, Barb.
Yeah, and in this particular case, we're talking specifically about looking for bids. So if you go back up there and just,
Contract and bid search.
Yep, and do the bids that are out there available. The nice thing that you'll see when you go out to the contract and bid search is there are quite a number of different fields that you can search off of. So in addition to your bid number, you're able to, if you want to look for a keyword from the bid description, if you want to look at only bids related to a specific NGP code, if you only want to look at and find bids related to a specific agency that you do business with, you want to pull that up under organization, Dave. One more up.
Oh.
Yeah. So you typically bid, on projects related to ag. So you can look at all of the available bids for agriculture. So as you can see, if you only have a little bit of information, if you're a small business and you only want to look at bids related to the Small Business Set-Aside Program, lots of great search features and functionality here to help you locate open bids.
Great. So I'll say my same spiel again. I'll wait for a couple more minutes if there's any other questions. Thanks for reminding me about this. And if there aren't any, we'll see you at the next training webinar.